I always tell people that, look, I was born here in this country. I wanted to be an American. I didn't want to be an immigrant kid. I didn't want to be discriminated against. But that's the way it was. I was born here. I'm a citizen. When the Uncle Sam called, I went into service. I served a couple of years during the Korean War. Afterwards, I went to school on the GI Bill and got a job, and I paid taxes all my life. I've been what I consider a good American. As a matter of fact, my dad was a very vigorous guy. He came to the States when he was 16 years old, or just becoming 16. As luck would have it, he arrived on the last boat before the start of World War I. The boat that he was on, English boat, was immediately sent back to become a troop carrier without any passengers. It went back, and it sunk off the coast of Ireland. And I tell the story in my book, Kisses from a Distance, of how he went from, a 16-year-old peasant kid to a 27-year-old bachelor going to find his wife. And he dressed, he became rather a dapper kind of guy. I mean, I have pictures of him, he was always dressed to the nines, and he went back, and it was always big news when an American came back home, and people crowded around. They wanted to know about America and so forth. My mother was a different woman. I tell people she was a feminist. Way back then, there was no word for feminism. They didn't even talk about it. But my mother had I should say, unfortunate upbringing. She was educated. She went to school, and after school, she became a French teacher. So she was a lot different from the average Lebanese housewife. She was the only one in my town that could read and write Arabic. And she also was facile in French. Yeah, my mother and dad got married in 1926. They had their first child in 1928, I believe. And I was born in 31. And so it was after I was born that she became despondent. As a matter of fact, my mother was a classic case of a person being totally depressed. Back then, you sucked it up and you did what you had to do. You had a family, you had to feed them, and all this sort of thing. But it was not a happy environment. When she died and we went through her belongings, we found all these letters she saved from 1925 up until about 10 years before she died. A stack of letters. She had them stored all around the house. She had a chest, which is called in Arabic a sanduq, she had saved. So, as I was saying about my mom, she was very disappointed in what she found in America. And her letters back to the old country expressed this. And she expressed it so vividly that my uncle on my mother's side told her he wanted her to come back. He wanted her to leave her husband, take the children, and come back. All I'm trying to tell you is that there was a story there. When I saw these letters, and after I debriefed both of them and so on, I said, this is a story that tells about all immigrants. It doesn't just tell about my family. My family, in my book, was just a vehicle on which the whole immigrant story is told. I wanted to tell everybody's story. My family is insignificant, It's just a vehicle. So that was the genesis of my becoming an author. Well, actually, I'd been writing for a long time, but I hadn't attempted a full-length book until I saw those letters. My brother took them to Lebanon and had them translated. He was good friends, actually, with Dr. Harb at LAU, and she was an expert in the old language. So she did a wonderful job of translating these letters. And my brother bound them up in a book, and he sent them to each of his siblings. When I read it, I said, there's a story here. So I began writing it. It took me 8 years. I would read the letters over and over again. I was living it. You can't believe how emotional it was for me. I'd be writing about my grandmother and the tears were coming down on my keyboard. I was feeling so sorry for these people, what they went through. And that's how I got here. You know? And it's an experience. I put my heart and soul into it, and I lived it. I spent a lot of money researching. 4 trips to Lebanon. You know, I wove in history. The Arab American Museum is the only place that has a chance of preserving the culture of my ancestors. You know, it's made up of the language. It's made up of the food that we ate, made up of the music that we listened to, the songs that we sang, the stories that we told. That's the culture. And what happens is that as the generations, you know, a lot of people don't understand that the immigrants were not the first generation. Their children are the first generation. I am a first generation Lebanese Arab American. And I have often thought that, you know, as we intermarry with other groups, the culture gets diluted. They don't speak the language at home. And I got to thinking, you know, what's going to happen to all these artifacts after I die? That's why I've saved all of my documents and all my books and everything. I don't know, maybe they'll be thrown out one day. But I wish I would have had that when I was researching my book. I had to go and spend days and weeks researching, and I would wish that I had a better understanding of the culture through my upbringing. And it's my belief that the only chance we have to preserve any semblance of the culture is the Arab American Museum. And so that's why I decided to give these artifacts over, because God only knows what would happen to them afterwards.